before I bring Dr. Todd Smith up, I just want to briefly comment on the Mississippi Miracle. Before the NAEP scores came out in October of 2022, we had been looking at various other states that were moving dramatically up or down in education in their policy numbers, and did our own kind of deep dive into what Mississippi was doing, because even before October's results were announced, Mississippi had been doing very, very well. I looked at those results and kind of realized that Mississippi had done what Susana Martinez tried to do in New Mexico in many ways. But I am going to listen intently and hear exactly how Mississippi did it. And Dr. Todd Smith is going to give you a great tutorial on how a school system can work. We all love choice. We all love sending kids wherever we want to send them to. But for the time being, in New Mexico, we're largely tied to the existing public school system. Desperately need to make that system work. So, Dr. Laurie Todd Smith.
Yeah, you could go ahead and go to the next one, and I'll start from that. Hello, and thank you for sticking it out for the rest of the day. I know that everyone's been here all day, and you've heard a lot of different speeches and remarks today. I heard some of them about education opportunities, so I was really excited to see so much emphasis on that topic. As you heard already, I have been a public school teacher for a number of years. I've also been a researcher. I like to tell people I was a preschool teacher in New Mexico that somehow became the director of the Women's Bureau at the Department of Labor in Washington, D.C., but that's really what happened. And New Mexico played such a special part in my career. About 30 years ago, I lived in Silver City, New Mexico, and I was working on my master's degree there. And I had applied for a job in the public schools, and there wasn't an opening because it was sort of the middle of the year. So I begrudgingly took a job at an early childhood preschool that was part of the lab school at Western New Mexico University. That's pretty life-changing. My whole career has been very focused on early childhood, and I always look back to that time. So my husband and I are staying through the weekend, and I'm going to drive to Silver City, and we're going to drive and see different places that I haven't been in many, many years. So very happy to be back in New Mexico. I also taught school in the Gadsden School District. We moved to Las Cruces for a while, so I taught at La Union Elementary School right there it was like an hour drive from Las Cruces, so near El Paso, but on the New Mexico side of that. So great experiences with great children and families, and I remember those times well, and they really did form a lot of what you're going to hear today. Let me just back up. I work now for America First Policy Institute, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C., but I like to call us a do tank because we do things. We don't just publish articles and write about it. But this year alone, I worked with 14 different states in passing school choice legislation. And while the last presenter was up on stage, I looked at Twitter real quick, and North Carolina just passed universal school choice, and that's a state we were helping in. So we now have 10 states in the United States that have passed universal school choice. We had 2 at the beginning of 2023. So big accomplishments there. And my role running the Center for Education Opportunity and the Center for the American Child is to really focus on those issues that help American families. And so school choice is our biggest priority in the education sector. I also work in foster care reform with Kellyanne Conway at the Center for the American Child, and we're focused on opioid addiction and fentanyl in young children and child care for working women, which is something I care deeply about. So that all being said, I have never forgot about New Mexico, and I'm sure you've heard these statistics and you already know them. The next slide, please. I always follow New Mexico and still follow what's happening here. And as you know, 21% of New Mexico's fourth graders are not reading proficiently. Or no, I'm sorry, only 21% of New Mexico's fourth graders read proficiently. Only 19% of your fourth graders in math. 18% of your eighth graders are reading proficiently, and only 13% of your eighth graders are proficient in math. So what I do in other states when I also point out the data, because you've already heard that during COVID, this was a nationwide problem. Every state's scores went down and we lost 30 years of progress in some reports. But these have lasting effects and they need immediate and major reform to be able to help these kids. School choice is one of them. But what I'm most excited to talk to you about today is my work in Mississippi, because I don't know how many like real examples you might have heard so far today of how do you do it? What are the steps? And at the time I went through this, it was kind of like at the time I was a preschool teacher, I didn't know how impactful that was going to be in my life. I didn't know what I didn't know in passing these bills and what a big effort it took in our state. There's been a New York Times article that came out about the Mississippi's accomplishments in education, and they referred to it as the Mississippi Miracle. And so from that perspective, I keep calling it, it's a little catchy to say the Mississippi Miracle, but a miracle insinuates that it just happened. We woke up and the kids were doing better. There was actually decades of work that went into building this miracle, but I still feel like in the New York Times article, they say, well, we used to say thank God for Mississippi because Mississippi used to be 50th in education when I started in the work in the governor's office. I can tell you now that we're now 21st in the nation in reading in a matter of 10 to 12 years. So more to come on that. But the story I want to tell you, I want to be sure the main point that you take away, or if you can listen for, is the collaborative effort that it took. It didn't just take one governor. It didn't just take a wonderful group like the Rio Grande Foundation. It didn't take just caring teachers and passionate people like myself. It really took a lot of effort and buy-in. So I think the next slide, if you don't mind. So in 2012, you might hear some similarities to your data right here. In 2012 is when Governor Phil Bryant took office in Mississippi. I was doing research in the state. I was asked to come in and talk to him about an early childhood job. Before I knew it, somehow I was going to be his education advisor. I've never been in politics, never been in anything other than classrooms and writing research. So it was exciting to be part of it. Mississippi had 78% of fourth graders that were not proficient in reading. 79% of eighth graders were not proficient in reading, and we were ranked 50th in the nation in student outcomes. We continued to have persistent achievement gaps. Our next slide has the college readiness benchmarks were not being met. And but looking at ACT scores of students, they were scoring okay overall, but they weren't meeting the 4 benchmarks that says you're college or career ready. And our community college system was spending, I think that's on there, $25.5 million on remediation as students entered college. So they were clearly not prepared for college or career. We had a quality teacher shortage. We had funding disparities. We had high poverty of children. Does that sound familiar to you? Mississippi still has the highest child poverty than any other state, including your state, our state. Mississippi's at 27.57, and I think New Mexico's 25.56. Either way, those are terrible numbers and hard to overcome for our states. So we developed something called the Framing Mississippi, an agenda for children. And I have links to everything I'm talking about that I can send and you can have access to. But Governor Bryant himself suffered from reading difficulties when he was a child. He tells a story of being told he was stupid in his early years. And he said, I just thought I was dumb. And he then had a teacher in fourth grade after he'd been held back that year that said, you're not dumb. You have a reading disorder. It's called dyslexia. The words are popping off the page. And he says, what a miracle it was to learn that that's what it was. And he stayed and did extra work with the teacher. And he always goes on in his speeches to say, I've had a lot of moderate success in life. He has had amazing success and became governor of the state. But as his advisor and a former teacher, I was very aware I couldn't give him 20 pages of briefing material. He's dyslexic. And so he could hear me talk and he remembered everything that we talked about. So amazing accommodations. But that's where his passion started on how we could focus on literacy in the state of Mississippi. So our Framing Mississippi's Future, which is the next slide, I believe, or maybe not, but I'll start talking about it anyway. Yes. And these are actually screenshots of the PowerPoint. I saved it and had it in my, on my computer. But what we included in this, knowing the data that we had, was the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. We had scholarships for quality teachers. We had school choice in this package. We had early childhood education funding. We had career readiness standards, accountability models, and reforms for higher education. Just a typical legislative year to pass all of that. That's kind of the miracle. Like that would be very difficult to have this happen again. But one thing that I think really helped is I took this PowerPoint and went on the road with it. Governor Bryant did as well, and our local state chamber of commerce did as well. And we met with parent groups. I met with teacher groups. I met with the Manufacturing Association. I met with the parent advocacy groups. I met with the advocacy groups that hated Governor Bryant. I met with every group that had an input. And I didn't just go say, oh, here's what the governor's going to do, and you all should drink this water. I said, what do you think? What would you put in a literacy bill? What do you need in the workforce? And we took notes and we adapted all of these bills. So the bill moved forward, the bill passed. It was multiple bills by the time it was over, and strike-alls and all kinds of things happened. But all of those areas passed that I described earlier. But if you were in Mississippi today and you were sitting and talking with anyone in the state and you asked about the education reforms, every single group and every single legislator claims that they did it. So have you ever heard the quote, it's amazing how much can be accomplished if nobody cares who gets the credit? That is really, I don't know how to explain it well, but that is really what happened. And I love that everybody owns it. And even the groups that were against parts of school choice were standing with us at the bill signing because they felt proud to be part of these major reforms. And so I think that's another important piece of it. The one thing I want to give, I don't know all your backgrounds and how many of you are teachers and policymakers and passionate folks, but the next slide, I believe, goes into a little bit more detail, I think, of the, that was our agenda in general, was promotion policies for student success, effective teachers, school choice for all families, and college and career readiness standards. And I think maybe the next slide is the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, or maybe not. I'm not sure. Yep, there it is. Thank you. So the biggest part of the bill was something called the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. And I think you heard earlier a reference to it. It was a bill to stop the social promotion of children. And do I have any teachers in here that, if I told you about retention, would you agree with me that retaining children in general does not help, just holding them back a year? In general, we know that's what the research says. So this is not a bill about just retaining children. The bill, and these are important pieces when you're trying to pass something, is to be able to clearly explain and respond to things like that. Oh, retention doesn't work, so the teacher group is against it. No, that's not accurate. This is a bill that gets children a lot of help before they need to be retained. So we put in $15 million that first year and deployed reading coaches into all the public, or into the lowest performing public schools. We brought in retired teachers and we were able to waive their retirement rules so they could come back and not be harmed in any way in their retirement funding, to be able to come back and help with the teaching of reading, the science of teaching of reading. We developed assessments, and do not think I almost called you Mississippi. New Mexico does not do this yet. We had the same assessment in every public school in the state of Mississippi. And guess how early the assessments happen? The first 30 days of kindergarten, the middle of kindergarten, the end of kindergarten, the first 30 days of first grade, middle of first grade, second grade, all the way up to third grade. The students get assessed 3 times each. The parents got a note home saying your child is at risk or is right on line. Your child's at risk of not passing third grade right now, and we want to help you. Here's some things you can be doing at home. The Department of Ed team developed all the materials that parents could be doing at home. So it really became an effort that parents were aware of very early. It also linked children to special education services much earlier than they had been. A lot of times we aren't catching that early enough in the public schools. So that was something I think that really helped, that early assessment and the notes going home. I would stop at a grocery store and be talking to the cashier, and she would say, my child got a note home, so I'm reading every night now. Everyone was talking about reading in the state. So as much as I'd love to tell you this bill changed the world, I honestly think it was the awareness around all of education and the collaborative effort that reading suddenly became a priority in our state. And it did start with our governor's leadership. We did have some, where did I write these, naysayers. The media, while we were after the bill had passed, after the first implementation, the media headlines that year, I pulled them. More than 5,000 third graders are going to be held back this year for low reading scores. Mississippi third grade gate, fear of failure. Critics blast the third grade gate. As Mississippi delivers the news to 5,600 third graders, stressed out parents say there must be a better way. Very dramatic and hard to stand the line. One time I was on the House floor and they tried to pass a bill to delay the third grade gate implementation, and we had to stop that very quickly. So we always had to be on our toes, but it was not easy. But keep in mind, this bill, and I think everything I just talked about in there, the reading coaches, the student assessments, how early they started. I forgot a big part. We retrained every kindergarten through third grade teacher in the state on the science of teaching reading. So when I was in college, whole language was what I was taught. And then moving into later, when we had a whole generation of kids that they could write, but they couldn't spell or read, phonics. So we retrained every kindergarten through third grade teacher in the whole state on the science of teaching reading, including the 5 elements of reading, which includes phonics. And we had the teachers take a pre-test, and based on how they scored on the online pre-test, they were entered into professional development and training, and they had to pass a post-test. Later, after a few years, we also got the faculty at the colleges of education who have doctorate degrees who usually say, oh, you're going to make me take a test? I've been teaching 20 years. The college professors now take a test as well. So we have every public institution singing from the same sheet of music on how to teach literacy. And we have the teachers all highly trained in how to use data to inform your practice and how to teach phonics and the basics of reading. That same year, we passed charter school bill for the first time, education savings accounts for special needs children, scholarships to recruit high-level teachers, and we also implemented an A through F rating system to rate our public school systems. I didn't look that up here. Do you all use stars or A through F or to rate your schools? I'm not sure how you do it. don't write any, so parents don't have any guide on, huh. Well, I think that helps to have some sort of information that goes into to doing that. So those are the key components of that bill that I think made huge outcome. And I want to tell you a little bit about the results that we encountered. And I think that's on the next slide, if you don't mind. The you heard a little bit about them, but well, one funny story I decided I would tell. So the first year we passed this bill, we started in 2012, it passed in 2013. In 2015, the first round of NAEP scores were coming out. I was on an embargoed call with the NAEP organization and the White House as my role as governor advisor. We got the data the day before so we could prepare press releases and all this. So I'm in my office. I have the conference line on. I see the webinar on my computer, and I'm halfway paying attention because Mississippi is always at the bottom. So I was just dreading it a bit. And I look at my screen, and the state of Mississippi was the only state that was highlighted. And I was like, oh gosh, it must be really bad this year. We're like the only one on the map. And I heard her say something about Mississippi. So I came off of mute and I said, would you mind repeating it? I think I missed it. Mississippi was the only state that made gains in fourth grade reading. I about fell out of my chair. It was embargoed. We weren't supposed to share, so I took a picture of my screen so I could go show the governor at least. And I was pretty shocked. I kept thinking, it's way too early. These interventions are just getting started, but we really did. And again, I think it was that awareness around reading that really helped even that initial bump in our scores. We went on in 2017, 19, 20, 22, and have continued, even when every other state declined, as you've already heard about the NAEP scores, Mississippi maintained their scores. So we didn't go down during COVID. That's miraculous to me in some regards. It really, it's so strange to even be able to say it. And who would have thought Mississippi? You know, we used to be thank God for Mississippi. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. So you can see on here, as I said, I think we're 21st in the nation now in the national rankings. Our fourth grade reading and math scores are the #1 in growth. We still have movement to make, but we have moved more than any other state. And to go from 50th to 21st is really not an easy thing to do. When New Mexico was probably with us at the same time, you were probably 49th and we were 50th. And so we have a lot of similarities there. And I don't mean in any way, I really always hated when people came in Mississippi and told me how bad my state was doing. That is not my intention here. I love New Mexico and I'm proud of the work and I am wanting to help. And so I share that Mississippi story as a comparison of what we did that possibly could be implemented here. The other miraculous accomplishment in this is, and I couldn't find your NAEP data for African American students, but I did have it broken down. Hispanic students, I believe, were 20 points lower than your white students in fourth grade. I don't know what the African American gap was, but in Mississippi, there used to be a much bigger gap, and our most in need students, those low income students, and those that might have English as a second language students are all moving up and closer to white students than they were ever before. And so we're very happy to see that gap being addressed. So we also have experienced higher graduation rates in the state. We are now above the national average on high school graduation rates. Our college and career readiness scores as measured by the ACT have improved, and more students have been entering the workforce ready to learn or entering into college in our state. I think the next slide has lessons learned. So I use these lessons learned, and Governor Bryant and I are actually writing a book right now about what this work is about the Mississippi Miracle, just to help legislators understand, it's easy to look at the data and it's easy to look at the reforms we made, but how those bills passed and how we got people together, I think is an interesting story. And then I'm doing a much deeper dive into the teacher part in the book about how we reformed how we teach reading in the state, because I think there's a lot to learn from that. But I've already pointed out the collaborative effort. I think that is really what helped transform education. Legislators from both sides of the aisle were on board for this. Educators, parents, community leaders all came together with a shared commitment of the future for their children. Adequate funding. We've continued to keep the reading coaches funded. I'd have to triple check, but I'm almost positive they're still at 15 million, if not more, per year in reading coaches that still go out, and they continue to go into the lowest performing schools. And so adequate funding was essential to providing those students with the resources they needed to. We had to buy iPads for all the younger children to take those assessments, because we don't want them having to sit down, but we make it real easy to sort of see where they are early in kindergarten. So there were some funds all associated with that. Professional development, as I've talked about, we prioritized teacher support, continue to do that. The program we used for the teachers is called the LETRS training, and it's spelled wrong, so I don't like it. It's LETRS. So it's an acronym for, and I can't remember, learning, I'm sure you can look it up, but LETRS is the acronym for the company that helped develop the training for the teachers. And all of this work was aligned to the assessments and the work. We also funded early childhood education. I know you do. I follow that very closely in New Mexico. Early childhood education is so important for those families that need it, and we put a lot of funding into that. In fact, that year was the first year of public state funds going into early childhood education in Mississippi. And a data-driven approach to all of this. I think you can see how we knew what the data was, we knew what we wanted to target, and our reforms were not just coming out of the wind. We said these kids can't read. We know that our prisons are filled with the average reading ability of a person in prison in Mississippi is at a 4th grade level. So we knew that 3rd grade gate is when you change from learning to read to reading to learn. And moving forward without that background is a recipe for disaster. I think it's very hard for kids to catch up if they can't read. We had high standards and accountability. And I've mentioned this being sort of a very long-term effort. It didn't just start one day and we woke up and everybody was doing better. They continue to do well, but it was a long-term commitment and years of dedication by teachers and our Department of Ed and faculty as well. So I think I'm going to stop there and take questions if you happen to have any. I know you're working on a lot of these same issues for your children here. We know that the future of workforce and the future of our states is really linked to the quality of their education earlier in life. And so I know those values are all still shared in this state, and I hope that maybe this was helpful for you to hear a little bit about what we did and my work with America First now. We are available to help like we have in many other states, and would love to partner with you if needed. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes, we did a lot with that. It starts kind of confusing, but as I moved from, I stayed policy advisor for education, but workforce was added to my platform. So I work very closely on the workforce end of things. We gave funding to the state budget to pay for the national assessments in high school for students that wanted to take their welding certification or whatever certifications they needed to start on day one. We would pay for that as a state. We pay for our students to take the work keys. I don't know what you require, and I should have looked this up, but most states require the ACT. in their state. I don't know what you require, but there's also one called the Work Keys that's done by ACT. And they measure what you're good at in general, and they give you some idea of the types of jobs that don't necessarily need you to go to college to get. And you get a certification like silver, gold, and bronze, I think. And so you can start a job already and say, look, I'm a gold on the whatever the colors are. That was another thing. But one thing I'm really proud of that we did that I would love to see other states replicate is a magazine. If you'll bear with me, we called it Mississippi Works. Arkansas does the same one called Arkansas Next. And you can come up with New Mexico, I don't know what that is. But we chose 15 young people in the trades right now in the state of Mississippi that, and we published a magazine highlighting these people in those careers. And we had a company that took photos of the students and their jobs. We developed Snapchat stories so you could see what a day in the life of the career in the at the power plant looked like. The students looked like real welder. They had tattoos and they were real people in these jobs. They talked about how they could move out of their parents' house and got their own apartment and had money to buy things and all of that. We got the community, we told them how much those jobs paid in this magazine. And then we told them who was training for those jobs and who was hiring right now. We picked the highest, most jobs in need. These magazines went to every 8th grader, every 11th grader, and every 12th grader. And I worked with teachers to develop lesson plans so you didn't just get a magazine dropped in your classroom and not have anything to do with it. And the magazines also had things you could scan. They were very modern. You could scan and register for free headphones if you did this and link them to the community colleges. So I really think that was a great resource, and I'd be happy to share the link, or you could Google it and find it. But I know the publisher very well too, if you wanted to explore that any further. But I thought that was a great thing to link. And at the federal level, you know, when I was at the U.S. Department of Labor as directing the Women's Bureau, we also passed legislation at the federal level that removed the requirement for a bachelor's degree for federal jobs, that not be the only thing that held somebody back from having a job in federal government. And so a lot of states are adopting legislation to kind of make it clear. I would advocate that parents need a note home their junior and senior years that says, the University of Mississippi has X number of dropout rate their first year of college, and here's the real graduation rate, here's the cost, and here's how many people had jobs after they graduated from the university, so parents could help make an informed decision, but haven't seen that happen yet. That's not widely loved. Yes, sir.
I'm going to go in a different direction
Okay.
because Mississippi was known for Huey Long.
Yes.
And yet somehow they survived it and overcame it, whereas New Mexico is still bogged down. My second point is there were some brilliant people from Mississippi. You had maybe the greatest American writer, one of the greatest, William Faulkner.
Yes, we did.
And yet somehow he emerged in Mississippi.
Yep.
When standards are so terrible, supposedly. And I went to the University of Delaware for my master's degree, and my chairman of the department was a Robert Pickford from Mississippi. Probably the most brilliant, engineer I ever met in my life, from Mississippi. So I don't know if you can make anything of that.
It's magic. And well, thank you for recognizing that. You know, for a long time after moving from New Mexico to Mississippi, people would say, what's wrong with you? Why'd you move there? You know, it was like, it had such a negative connotation. So it's nice to hear that you even knew some of the great stories from our state. We have had numerous writers and musicians. If you've never been to the Delta of Mississippi, there's a blues music tour that's just phenomenal. And you can take a canoe down the Mississippi River. It's a beautiful state, and a lot of people just haven't been there. So I appreciate that. But yes, we have a lot of great people. Morgan Freeman is a big early childhood advocate. He's spoken on many of our panels. Oprah Winfrey is originally from Mississippi. Selma Hayek, not Selma Hayek, the other lady is from, Faith Hill is from Star, Mississippi. We have a lot of famous people, so.
Guy who created the Netscape browser that put a lot of money behind.
Yes, yes, I'm so glad you brought that up because there's a whole chapter in my book about that. So Jim Barksdale was the founder of Netscape many years ago, if you remember Netscape. And then he became the CEO of FedEx. And he goes around saying, if I can get a package from Jackson, Mississippi to, New York in a day, we ought to be able to figure out education and how to help children improve. He retired back in Mississippi and started a foundation called the Barksdale Reading Institute. He donated $10 million to the Barksdale Reading Institute to study what was happening in the public schools. What all did we need to do? And so when I got into the role in the governor's office, the Barksdale Reading Institute was invaluable to me to be able to pull the data of how many reading coaches am I going to need? How many low-performing schools, where should we send them first? And how much money would be adequate? And all those questions they helped develop. So he is very retired now. I haven't seen him in a long time, but he has been a big supporter of education and always a big, we try to give him the credit, but he walks around and does this to you. Like, no. But yeah, huge. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a comment on, we talk a lot here, being 51st or whatever, that if we could only move up to, we say Mississippi, or, we really don't want to have someone else lower than us in terms of, that doesn't help anybody. The idea of quality
Yes.
is what's important. So I think we need to kind of drop that idea. But I'm really curious about getting the teachers and the colleges to test their ability to teach reading, because I think a lot of our teachers going out there are learning for the grade math to teach it, and I'm just curious how you broke that class.
Yeah. Yes, great question and great comment. I don't like the rankings either, just for the record, and I don't think data defines what's really happening in states, but it does give us a picture. The NAEP scores, as has already been said, are really the only apples to apples comparison. So this isn't all about, the win here is children being able to read, not the rankings. So thank you for making me say that better. But the teacher part was fascinating to me. There was a little resistance. The bill included that teachers were to be retrained on the science of teaching reading, and there was some resistance to it. But I went around the state, as well as many other states, and said what I just said to you. I was a teacher. I got my doctorate degree 25 years ago. I would need to be retrained. I don't know how to teach reading because it's different than how I learned in college. So this isn't a bad on you as a teacher. We want to help you and make sure, and it seemed little by little. And then the letters training was so engaging and good and not just linear and very responsive that it was very well received. We did small group sessions with teachers in small auditoriums like this. It was never like everybody just do the same thing. It was very individualized when needed. And then the reading coaches also work with the teachers. So if teachers struggled, we were able to help them. But the colleges of education, that was not in the bill. So after the bill passed and we were well on our way, we formed the Governor's Council on Teacher Preparation and Early Literacy. And I appointed every dean of the College of Ed from all the public universities on that. He appointed several superintendents, several teachers, several parents. And the Barksdale Reading Institute helped me facilitate that. And we held meetings and we drafted a report with recommendations. And because the faculty and their college dean was on there, and we wanted everyone to share the same syllabi and be teaching from the same textbook and know that you knew how to teach the science of reading, little by little, it became their idea. Instead of us saying, it came from the report. You guys were the ones that recommended it. And so it was not top down. Again, that buy-in and bringing the right people to the table. It's really sounds so simple, but you would be surprised. I remember this in New Mexico, and I didn't do policy when I was here, but I follow my friends who are in that world. And even in Mississippi, sometimes I wouldn't even see the superintendent of education, but we'd be at a conference in New Mexico and sit and have dinner together and finally like go through all this. So it's not as common as you think that all the right people are at the table. And in the governor's office, we were able to say things like no substitutions. You can't just send your grad student. You can't just send, you've been appointed by the governor to do this. And that role of leadership was invaluable. Governor Bryant, he used to say, I'd say, Governor, the headline says 5,600 kids are going to be held back this first year. And he'd look at me and he said, do you have like a button I could wear? He said, I'm going to wear it like a badge of honor. And I was like, don't say that to the media. But he did. He stood firm. And I forgot to mention too, when he left office, I told you that, 76% or 78 on that PowerPoint that weren't reading. We had 92% passing their state reading test when he left office in 2020. So it was, that was before COVID numbers. And so I think they're still in the 80 and, high, but his leadership became, because the others followed from his leadership. So
Is that professional development ongoing?
Yes, it is. And so they're getting it in teacher prep programs now. They get the letters training and the test before you even become a teacher. And then the teachers that are teaching reading. Oh, and I forgot to mention, sorry, I know I need to stop. When a child fails third grade, that's the last resort of that bill. I think I forgot to say that. And if they repeat third grade, they are required to be with a highly qualified reading teacher. And they were required to have a whole different experience, a smaller class size, 90 minutes of reading instruction in the repeating year, and you have to be with a higher level teacher who's certified at an even higher level. So yes, yeah, it's a do-over, but with the best. And if you think about Finland and these other countries, they put their PhDs teaching early childhood education, and they have people with just high school diplomas teaching high school and higher, because if you get it right on the front end and you're able to get kids to read and all that, your job's a little easier on the back end. We do the opposite. We think early childhood and kindergarten and first grade are similar to babysitting or something, and there's really a lot more going on there. Yes, sir. I think I'm going to
Very remarkable story. I'd like to hear just a little bit more to close it out, and that is, how did you get the grassroots of the population, the parents, to buy into all the things that you did legislatively and proactively?
Great question. We had various things. I will tell you the most successful one was when, during that year, was bringing in parents of special needs children when we were passing school choice. We had a rally at the Capitol, and they all came, the parents and their children that day. And I dare you to look in the face of a mom or a dad of a special needs child and have, seriously, why can't we help them if that's what they choose to do with their state dollars? And so that significantly helped bring parents to the table and kind of raise the flag on these other issues. We did a lot of speaking about it, like I mentioned, at all the state chamber of commerces and the city chamber of commerces, and then the big state chamber of commerce and publications. Brought in experts, lots of events. I visited 15 cities in 6 days, I think, or 5 days, maybe we called it the, Literacy Roadshow, where we went around and gave the same remarks to try to engage people more. And again, our phone numbers and doors were open at all times. I was constantly bringing every constituent that called. We took a meeting with them. We met with the Black Caucus in Mississippi. We met with the Democrat Caucus in Mississippi. We met with any group that was willing and interested in what we were doing and trying to understand how it impacted their constituents, we met with. When the bill was presented on the House floor, Representative John Moore, I was so lucky to get to do this. He let me sit behind him at the podium, and I think that breaks a rule or something, but I was able to help give any kind of research and information about the bills to answer questions. So I'll think about that some more. There's a lot more we did. It was quite a while ago, but those are some of the highlights of what we did, and it really did help bring the awareness around why this is important. And a parent getting a note home, we do cards now. It's like an activity card, and it looks as colorful as this does, and the child brings it home in their backpack, and it's got 5 activities tailored to what you need. If you're behind on sight words, it tells you what to do with your kid. It's very individualized. I think that really helps engage the parents. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, Donald, my favorite Mississippi writer is Shelby Foote and his narrative history of the Civil War. 101 volumes. If you pick that up in CD form, each stack of CDs, third of the book, a third of the book, a third of the book. But another great Mississippi writer. You won't be. It'll take you a while, but great Mississippi writer. And we have our New Mexico writers here as well. But thank you all for coming and sticking with it to the end. And thank you, Dr. Todd Smith, for being a leader in education and sharing your expertise with us here in New Mexico. I truly hope that we can follow Mississippi's path to better results by any means necessary, to quote Malcolm X, who's not exactly a writer that I would normally quote, but we definitely need to do it, and that was kind of the thrust behind the conference. So thank you again, and enjoy your trip to Silver City and all points in between. And I'm sure if you get in touch with Rebecca Dow, she'll encourage you to drop by the hot springs in Truth or Consequences, which is where she's from. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.